The year is 2002, and Spider-Man just became the first movie to gross $100 million in a single weekend. This was also the year when Kelly Clarkson won the very first American Idol, Ben Affleck was named the sexiest man alive, and life suddenly got complicated for Avril Lavigne. We're not here to fall and crawl and break and take what I get, because today we're counting down Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 2002. That's the way it is. If there's a problem with this best and worst series, it's that the years don't always line up perfectly. This usually comes down to the way magazines are published, both with the lead time and the release schedule. Because of this, a game released in, say, November or December may not wind up in EGM's pages until January or February of the next year. Now, you have to remember that it was common for the January issue to show up on newsstands in December, which meant that the reviews were actually pretty timely. However, because we're using the months and the years on the cover to construct these best and worst lists, the results can occasionally be a little messy. This was especially true in 2002, thanks in large part to Nintendo's GameCube and the Xbox from Microsoft both launching in November. But even if we ignore those two massive console launches, the end of 2001 also brought us Grand Theft Auto 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, and a number of other heavy hitters. With so many great games released that holiday season, Electronic Gaming Monthly didn't get to most of them until January and February of 2002. This means that exactly half of this episode is going to be devoted to catching up on launch games, AAA sequels, and of course Final Fantasy X, which just so happens to be the 10th best reviewed game of 2002. As I expected, Final Fantasy X is a technical milestone, a stunning example of what oodles of money and expertise can extract from the PlayStation 2 start chain. The graphics shine, the battles thrill, and the voice acting entertains. However, that's not why it's the best Final Fantasy of the last decade. All those glorious graphics are just gravy, as the lovable characters and compelling story provide the true heart of Final Fantasy X. Greg didn't have a lot to say about the characters and stories, instead choosing to talk about the revamped fighting system. I personally hope they never go back to the old active time battle formula. He gave it the lowest score and complained that the new leveling up system may screw you over at the end of the game. With an average of 9.3 out of 10, Final Fantasy X doesn't reach the same heights as 7, 8, and 9, but I definitely wouldn't call it a disappointment. In a world that is overflowing with first and third-person online shooters, it's sometimes hard to remember that there was a time when there were only a handful to choose from. This was especially true for console gamers during the early part of the 21st century. It's easy to say that SOCOM US Navy SEALs was Sony's answer to Halo, but this squad-based tactical shooter managed to stand out on its own and provide PlayStation 2 owners with the first truly convincing reason to take their console online. It helped to lay the groundwork for a lot of modern military shooters, and the EGM critics were quick to sing its praises. What I find funny about these old reviews is how little they actually talk about the online multiplayer mode. Mark, for example, spent 75% of his review comparing the computer AI to Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, and going into detail about the single-player campaign. He eventually gets there, saying that the multiplayer is the real reason to buy SOCOM. The realistic weapons and possibility of one-shot deaths gives it a visceral excitement other shooters lack. For his part, Crispin actually focused his attention on the online modes. Creeping through the bushes and covering buddies' backs will pump your pulse to turbo speed. Che went a step further, saying that SOCOM would easily have scored a 10 for its addictive multiplayer mode and innovative use of sound, but couldn't quite get there because most people didn't have broadband internet in 2002. I mean, he's not wrong, but that seems like a pretty crummy reason to deduct points. With an average of 9.3 out of 10, SOCOM US Navy SEALs is EGM's 9th best reviewed game of the year. In a year filled with console launches and mega-budget blockbuster hits, it was Grand Theft Auto 3 that proved to be the biggest surprise. Now, it's important to remember that this was a game that was largely ignored prior to release, and it's easy to see why. Not only was the E3 demo rough in all the worst ways, but it was part of a franchise with a very spotty track record. EGM gave the original Grand Theft Auto and its sequel, as well as London 1969, each an average score of 6.5 out of 10. So, it's safe to say that expectations were low that Rockstar would be able to pull off such an ambitious project. But pull it off they did, and this 2001 action game went on to become one of the most influential games of all time. This game is set in a sprawling metropolis called Liberty City, and I can't think of a better name for this place, explains Crispin. Grand Theft Auto 3 gives you the freedom to do enough stuff to fill 10 games. I wasted hours picking up fares in a taxi, chasing crooks in a cop car, hitting ramps for stunt bonuses, and exploring the different parts of town. Milkman echoed those thoughts, noting, of all the incredible things that Grand Theft Auto 3 does, what amazes me the most is how much stuff is crammed in there. It's rare that a game limited to one genre can get everything right. He gave it a 10 and argued that the level of detail in this game is so great, you could spend weeks trying to discover everything. A game like this could have gotten too big and too ambitious for its own good. But no matter how you choose to spend your time, getting back to your primary objective is always an easy process. Oh, if only Milkman could have looked into the future to see how big and ambitious this series would become. With nothing but high marks, Grand Theft Auto 3 managed to score an average of 9.3 out of 10. Oh, talk about pressure. How are you supposed to follow up a game that was not only the most influential 3D platformer ever made, but also the sequel EGM ranked the 4th and then 5th best game of all time? If you're Nintendo, you send Super Mario on a vacation and funnel all that pressure into a water pack. Although wildly fun and imaginative, Super Mario Sunshine wasn't as novel as Super Mario 64. 3D platforming was old hat by 2002, but with pretty much every developer trying to once again mimic Nintendo. As a result, some might have considered Super Mario Sunshine a bit of a letdown at the time, but the review crew at EGM didn't seem so concerned. Super Mario Sunshine is 100% pure, unadulterated fun, starts John. The moment you start playing, everything just clicks, the same way it did with Mario 64, and you immediately know that you're in for a hell of a ride. Greg initially seemed disappointed that the only major gameplay upgrade comes in the form of a water pack, but concludes that it adds an entirely new dimension to the game. This isn't just another Mario 64. His only other complaint was that the camera was still a little screwy, something Nintendo couldn't quite seem to get right. Mark also brought up the camera concerns, but chose to spend most of his review gushing over the ghost hunting, squid surfing, roller coaster riding, and sheer variety found in Super Mario Sunshine. Everybody loved the colorful graphics, inventive levels, and fun gameplay, ultimately giving this GameCube classic an average of 9.5 out of 10, the exact same score they gave Super Mario 64. Super Smash Bros. Melee was the exact moment when Electronic Gaming Monthly went from liking this odd little fighting game franchise to absolutely loving it. With an average of 8.6 out of 10, the Nintendo 64 original received solid scores, but was nowhere near the top of the pack. This GameCube sequel adds everything you could possibly want to the formula, including better characters, cooler secrets, a crazy single-player mode, and more levels based on your favorite Nintendo games. Smash Bros. Was suddenly a real contender, not just one of those silly spin-offs like Mario Party. That said, Chris wasn't initially impressed with the sequel. When we first got Melee in the office, I took it home, played a few rounds, and put the controller down, unimpressed. Later, while exploring the game's many modes, I stumbled into Event Mode and suddenly couldn't stop playing. What I expected to be a tacked-on, half-assed extra mode was really the meat of the game. Dan Shu was also surprised, but in a different way. This Godzilla of a game really surprised me, as early demos indicated that it was little more than a ho-hum update. But the final product is mind-blowing. It gives you so much to play with. Now, he did have one worry. The frantic, chaotic fighting may confuse most casual gamers, and the non-Nintendo faithful won't appreciate all the goodies from the venerable company. Funny, I always felt that Smash Bros. Was made for the casual market, but I guess I can see that point. With all three critics in complete agreement, Super Smash Bros. Melee averages a punchy 9.5 out of 10. Much like the game itself, the Metal Gear Solid 2 reviews are something of a conundrum. If you were to simply read it, you'd think that the editors gave it 7s or 8s, but all three critics gave the much-anticipated sequel a 9.5, planting it firmly in the 5th place position on the countdown. Mark even starts his review by explaining that Metal Gear Solid 2 is not an easy game to review. The overall quality is unquestionably high, some of the best graphics on a home game yet, ridiculously detailed environments packed with secrets, tiny jokes and optional extras, replay bolstered by collectibles and harder difficulties, and control that you can truly master. But the story, oh, how do I put this? Sucks ass! I kept assuming that it would get better, that the end would hold some incredible explanation that would cause something to make perfect sense in retrospect, but it never happened. In fact, the plot got worse and worse, piling twist upon twist until near the end I was literally laughing at how ridiculous it had all become. Jonathan argued that he wanted to give the game a 9.8, docking the game only for the overcooked story. All the double crosses and heady political talk breaks up the game's momentum and leaves your melon spinning by the end of the adventure. Even Che notes that if this is indeed the last in the series, then it ends, as one villain quotes in the game, not with a bang, but a whimper. Like I said, these are surprisingly negative takes for a game with 3 near-perfect scores. Sure, they liked so much about this game, but you would think that with such a crummy story that it would knock at least a few points off the final rating. I mean, Mark literally spends 2/3 of his review complaining about how much he hates the plot and how it sucks ass. Even though I'm dubious that the scores line up with the review, Metal Gear Solid 2 averages a stealthy 9.5 out of 10. You know, there's nothing I like more than when one of these lists surprises me. I go into these years expecting high scores from games like Metal Gear Solid 2, Grand Theft Auto 3, and Final Fantasy X. But who would have guessed that Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance would beat them all? This is the second year in a row where a Castlevania sequel on the Game Boy Advance manages to find its way towards the top of the list. What's even more impressive is that this 2002 installment managed to outscore last year's Circle of the Moon. In fact, Harmony of Dissonance scored so well that it currently holds the title as EGM's best reviewed Castlevania game, high above classics like Symphony of the Night and Dracula's Curse. Greg sums it up perfectly. Circle of the Moon was really good, but Harmony of Dissonance is great. Just about everything I don't like about the first Game Boy Advance vampire-slaying adventure has been fixed here. He concluded that he hasn't been this into Castlevania since Symphony of the Night and gave it a 10. John wasn't ready to give it a perfect score, but he did call it the perfect mix of action and exploration. Several nights in a row, I found myself playing until 2 or 3 in the morning, continuously promising myself that I'd go to bed after finishing just one more area. He later gripes that the boss battles are too easy and the music is a big step down from Circle of the Moon. Minor nitpicks aside, Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance averaged a series high of 9.7 out of 10. I'm sorry, sports fans, but the Renaissance is over. After honoring football, hockey, and soccer, EGM is back to ignoring them completely. In their place are the fighting games, which have largely been absent from the countdown since Soul Calibur in 1999. But thanks to Super Smash Bros. Melee and now Virtua Fighter 4, the genre is back and more diverse than ever. This was a return to form for Sega, who is making the list for the very first time as a third-party publisher. After a mixed reception for the third installment, Virtua Fighter 4 reminded critics and players why they fell in love with the series in the first place. Che couldn't believe the game's depth. The amount of interaction you have in the training mode and the length to which Virtua Fighter 4 actually eases you into the deep as hell gameplay is something unprecedented. In fact, Virtua Fighter 4's many features are so innovative, anything less from future console fighters will be disappointing. Milkman agreed, choosing to write a snarky letter to Soul Calibur. I'm sorry it has to be like this, but I've met someone else. What you and I had will always be special, but I need some room to grow and find myself. The new love of my life gives me joy in so many ways. Those ways include a cool promotion system, incredible AI, beautiful graphics, and deep gameplay. With an average of 9.8 out of 10, Virtua Fighter 4 earns its spot as EGM's third best reviewed game of 2002. Like pretty much everybody else, Electronic Gaming Monthly was caught off guard by both the ambition and the impact of Grand Theft Auto 3. They were not going to make the same mistake 11 issues later when it came to Vice City, a spin-off of sorts set in the neon-colored 1980s. The magazine spent the lead-up to release hyping every detail they could find, no matter how big or small. And when they finally got around to publishing their reviews, all three editors were given a page to tell the readers why it deserved a perfect 10 out of 10 score. EGM knew that this was going to be a huge deal, and they made the most out of it. I like the way Milkman sums up Grand Theft Auto. Vice City's raven-haired protagonist-antagonist is a macho Super Mario for the 18 and over crowd. And as with most Mario titles, casual gamers can enjoy playing around without ever having to finish the game. This is definitely the appeal of the franchise, and one of the reasons why it continues to be popular nearly 2 decades later. Che argues that Vice City isn't the ultimate flashback, but rather the ultimate payback. Picking up conceptually where Grand Theft Auto 3 left off, Vice City lets you play a mugs game against the sonic backdrop of Cold War Reaganomics. In fact, if there's ever an award given out for best music in a video game, Vice City would win totally uncontested. Wait, if there's ever an award for best music in a video game? If there is, does Che not know that EGM gave out many different best music awards throughout the years? That seems like an oversight. Anyway, Greg initially worried that the lead protagonist would no longer be a nameless, voiceless criminal, but quickly got over that. The story is so well conceived and superbly acted by people like Ray Liotta, Dennis Hopper, and Ms. Cleo, you get totally drawn into the plot. And unlike Metal Gear Solid 2, Vice City actually has a plot worth talking about. Perhaps that's why all three editors gave this 80s-themed Grand Theft Auto game an average score of 10 out of 10. At the top of this episode, I warned you that many of 2001's biggest games weren't reviewed until EGM's January 2002 issue. That's certainly the case when it comes to Halo and the rest of the Xbox launch lineup. As weird as it is to have Master Chief competing next to Tommy Vercetti, EGM's lead time and release schedule made that unavoidable. But ignore that weirdness for a moment, because Halo will always stand out, no matter what year it is. This was a major sea change for console-based first-person shooters, effectively making GoldenEye 007 and Perfect Dark obsolete with one well-placed sniper shot. It was also the best-reviewed game at the Xbox launch, right above Munch's Odyssey, Project Gotham Racing, Dead or Alive 3, and Silent Hill 2. This is easily one of the best launch games ever made. Craig decided to compare the game to 2 of my personal favorite movies. This game's plot rivals the best sci-fi movies, and its dark twist made me crap my pants almost as much as The Secret in the Crying Game did. Halo's atmosphere keeps you on edge with the perfect combination of wonder and suspense reminiscent of Aliens. Kick ass, proclaims Gene Kim. who just so happens to be the first woman to be quoted in one of these EGM best and worst lists. She concludes that Halo explains what next generation actually means, and raved about the epic 16-player battles. Che got the long review and explained that Halo is a game that engages your intellect on a whole different level. He liked that you could tackle each part of the game in countless ways, allowing you to plan and execute radically different strategies. He also raved that it single-handedly raised the bar for graphical and gameplay excellence for all games in the forthcoming System Wars. He wasn't wrong. Although it definitely seems a little weird saying this. Halo's average of 10 out of 10 makes it Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed game of 2002. I know, it may sound crazy, but it's true. Hey, thanks for watching us counting down Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 2002. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we'll be back on Friday with a look at EGM's worst reviewed games of 2002. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite game from 2002? Oh, I know this countdown has been screwy and full of 2001 games, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to sift through the 2002 releases and come up with something good. In other news, we're almost done with this season of EGM's best and worst. There's only one more episode before the end of the year, but don't worry, I've been thinking about ways to expand on these charts, including doing some real deep dive stuff on different eras, and maybe looking at the games of the month that fell short of the best reviewed lists. Yeah, we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.